All right, everybody, welcome back. Season 5 premiere of Difficult Conversations by Supply the Why. If you haven't been here before, I'm Dean Jenkins. I'm the host. And tonight, this is the way to kick off any season. We got a real American hero with us tonight. We're joined by Detective Mario Oliveira, who's retired. And he survived one of the most gruesome and nightmarish ordeals, for lack of a better way to put it, that I've ever heard. And he's here to share his story and share everything that he went through with all of you. My hope for tonight is that I know a lot of police officers in the Massachusetts and New England area have seen the show before and have seen and maybe even seen Mario talk in person. But my hope is that a lot of people that aren't in law enforcement also join us tonight, and that those of you in law enforcement, you share this show with your non-law enforcement brothers and sisters so they can get a better feel and a better flavor for what's at stake every time that we suit up and hit the streets. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring Mario on, and he's going to tell you a little bit about himself and how he's been rolling. Mario, how you doing?
Good evening, sir. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, it's an honor for you to come and join us. We're so blessed and so happy to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What have you been up to, and what were some of the highlights of your careers?
Sure. I was on the job for about close to 17 years. Worked for Somerville PD in 2000, end of 2008, beginning 2009. I was assigned to the ATF in Boston. Had a short-lived career there, sadly. As you know, I got shot in line of duty in 2010. Went back to work only to suffer a subsequent medical setback, 2 of them actually, a heart attack and a stroke. That forced me out. I've been involved in some nonprofit work, one being COPS, Concerns of Police Survivors. I've been involved with them for 22 years since I got on the job. And as of late, since 2012, I founded another organization called VIPO, Violently Injured Police Officers, where my partner and I, Bob DiNapoli from Woburn, we actually assist those that are permanently injured. We're working with legislators to try to make some new laws to give them some benefits. I'll get into that later on in the show.
Mario, it's amazing what you've been doing. A lot of people would have went through what you went through, and they would have said, you know what, I've done my time. I don't want to hear about it, talk about it, think about it. But what did you do? You dove right back into the deep end of the pool, and you just got right back in there. You're trying to help those of us that are still out there trying to fight the good fight. So we appreciate you. So what I'm going to do for those of you, just to give you a little flavor, is just show you a quick video that'll give you a little taste, and then Mario's going to go into it and fill in a lot of what we're all here to see. So stand by.
He lost me twice. I died twice on the table.
A Somerville detective almost killed in the line of duty is now retiring. Mario Oliveira was shot 6 times while executing a search warrant in 2010.
At New at 6 tonight, he talks to News Center 5's Rondella Richardson about his terrifying ordeal, his fight for survival, and why leaving is so bittersweet.
Despite the chronic pains and discomforts every single day, I'm glad to be alive and be able to play with my kids.
Detective Mario Oliveira put in 15 years and 2 months as a Somerville cop. The shooting, November 2010, nearly killed him.
I was thinking, I'm dead, I'm dying. And that's when I was telling the paramedic, you do your job and I'm going to do mine. You keep me alive and I'm going to fight to stay alive. I was actually shot 6 times from what the doctors told me, but they went from 3 to 5 to it's actually 6 times. I got shot once in my forearm that went out the back of my elbow, twice in my chest, and 3 in my stomach.
With the ATF task force, he got hundreds of guns off the street. He is the highest decorated officer. This, the first week of retirement, bittersweet at age 45.
I have a bullet in my back and some bullet fragments in my stomach and permanent nerve damage in my arm and my hand. And then I suffered a heart attack after I went back to work. And I figured that was my body telling me time to quit.
Oliveira was the first to the car door to confront a known gun dealer during the shooting 4 years ago.
After surviving the shooting, the suspect's associates made threats on Oliveira's life.
Some of the people wanted to finish me off.
In retirement, he's deeply devoted to talking to cops and helping departments cope with grief. In Somerville, Rondella Richardson, WCVB News Center 5.
Powerful stuff. So Mario, floor's yours. Take us back to that night. Take us back to everything that led up to that.
Sure. So in early, actually mid-2010, I would say probably middle of September, I received a report, a multiple gun sales report. Let me digress for a second to the audience. In 1968, the federal government passed the Gun Control Act of 1968. That pretty much, it mandates shop owners to report multiple sales. So if you buy more than 2 guns in a span of 5 business days, the shop owner reports those transactions to the local ATF office. And I got one of these reports. It was for a young man from Somerville who bought 10 guns in a week. He was 21 years old. I don't know about you, Dean, but what 21-year-old do you know that buys 10 guns in a week? I would say something was definitely amiss there. So following my gut instinct, I started doing some digging, and I learned through my investigation that this kid had made friends with another young man in New Hampshire, paid him money to put his name on his lease that gave him residency in New Hampshire. And with this fictitious lease that he had now, he went in on October 8th to the RMV and got a New Hampshire driver's license, all the while having an active Mass driver's license, which is a no-no. And he went in to the RMV, acquired a new driver's license, and then within a half hour of getting that freshly printed license, he made a beeline to the gun store where he bought his first 2 guns. Then he repeated this process, for the following week. And what I learned through my investigation was that, I'll say his name, Matt Christer was the young man. He would use a Dremel and he would obliterate the serial numbers of these guns. And he would take orders from the gang members in Boston. They would tell him, like, get me a 40 cal, get me a 9mm, whatever. He would take the serial numbers off of them. He'd buy the gun with his own cash for $400. And then he'd meet these kids in Boston and then sell them for like $1,800 a pop. So he was making good money. And that was his game. So at one point, I brought him into the station along with my partner, Special Agent Higgins. We brought Matt into the Somerville Police Department using a ruse. And he came in under the auspices of, he thought he was going to see a photo array, which I had no photo array to show him. That's how I lured him into the station. At Buffalo,
So that's what a ruse is, just so for people that aren't in police work.
A ruse is a tactic that we use in law enforcement where we can lie to the public and lure them into the police department so we can talk to them about an incident. So they're thinking they're coming for one reason, but they're really not. So we're permitted to lie, essentially, using a ruse. So we trick people to come to the station thinking they're going in there for another reason, but we really want to talk to them about a crime or an incident. So this kid came in thinking he was going to look at a photo already because he had been stabbed at a party. So he thought I was going to show him a photo already. He came in, my partner and I sat him down, and after a few short minutes, he confessed to his crimes. He told us everything, that he was going up to New Hampshire, buying guns, meeting these kids in Boston, and selling them. So, being the nice guy that I am, I gave him a deal of a lifetime. Rather than arresting him and sending him to federal prison, I offered him an opportunity to work for the police and work off his crimes by being an informant, working for me and my partner so we could dismantle the gang in Boston. Well, what we do at the ATF is we would give this kid guns with no firing pins, real guns. He would sell them to these criminals, and we would watch the whole thing and come in and arrest everybody. We would unarrest Matt after the kid went to the station, so no one. It would look like everybody got arrested, and then we would repeat this process over and over again until we got everybody under arrest. So, I I walked Matt out to the front door. He hemmed and hawed for a little bit. He said he was going to work, and he wasn't going to work, and he was crying. And I looked at him as one of my little brothers. You know, I have 6 brothers, and I felt bad for the kid. I really did. I gave him a hug. I walked him out to the front door, and I told him, I got your back. Do the right thing by me, and I'll take care of you. And when we're done with this case, we'll put you in the witness protection program, move you out of state, give you a new identity. You'll start your life all over again. You're 21 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. You know, and that's what I was thinking. Honestly, that's what I did, actually.
So how did he receive that when you brought that to him like that?
Initially, he said, I'm not a rat. I'm from Somerville. We're not rats. And I said, Matt, you can go to prison, or you can be a free man. You can help the police. Right or wrong. What's your choice? I gave him a few minutes. I walked out of the room and got a water. I came back, and he was in tears. He was reluctant, and then he said, all right, I'll do it. I'll do it. So we had scheduled a one of these reverse sting operations for the next day to get our first guy. And I told him, I said, meet me at the station 11 a.m. and we'll do our first operation. He goes, all right, no problem. Next day, I'm at the station with all my guys, my chief, deputy chiefs, ATF guys, and 11 o'clock came around, and I'm looking at my watch, and I'm like, looking at the door, never came in. I called his phone, right to voicemail, called him 6 times, right to voicemail. Finally, my boss told me, he's not coming. I'll get warrants for him. He's done. So I ended up getting federal warrants for his arrest. And I called him. That night I went home. I had a fake Facebook account. And I went in and I had friended him at the onset of this investigation. When I went onto his Facebook wall, I saw that he wrote, fuck the ATF, fuck the Somerville police, I'm going to do me and do me strong. That's what he wrote on his Facebook page that night. I was like beside myself. Here's a kid that I try to help after he screwed up. And this is the thanks that I get. A little disrespectful little bastard, right? That's what you're thinking. So now, warrants are in the system. He called me the next day from an unknown number. And I answered, and I asked him why he didn't show up. And he said, I changed my mind. These guys are going to kill you, and they're going to kill me. I can't do this. And I said, Matt, all bets are off. I'm coming for you. You're going to jail. I give you an opportunity. There's no more deals. You're done. And that was the last I heard of him. So my partner and I had made several trips to his house at different times of the day for the upcoming weeks. We were there at night, in the morning, late at night. No signs of his car. He drove a red 2-door Honda Accord. He was amongst the missing. I figured he was going to Florida or something. Knew he was wanted. Knew he made a big mistake. Wouldn't you leave? Right?
Oh, I'd be gone. Yeah.
Exactly. You're not hanging around. So I thought. So fast forward now to November 2nd, 2010. It was a Tuesday. It was election night. I had a detail that morning. And my plan was to work a detail and work a night shift with Brian and just go home. That was my plan. I remember just leaving my door, didn't say goodbye to my wife or my son, because I was in a rush like we always are as cops, right? We're always banging out details, going to our shift, back and forth. And I remember just leaving because I was in a rush. I worked a detail. I got signed out a little earlier than usual. I called up Brian. I said, hey, I'm out. I'm going to go to the station, work out a little bit. I'll shower and change there, and let's meet up in the lobby around 4 p.m. So Brian said, yeah, no problem. We'll meet you there. So everything worked out in a timely fashion. I met Brian at the station. We were talking about what we were going to do. We were going to the projects. We were going to just try to drum up some business, talk to some local young kids to see if we can talk to them and they can give us some information on guns and drugs and what have you. Typical stuff that, undercover guys do. And now we went to the store real quick. Brian says to me, hey, let's take a ride by Krista's house. You have the warrant? I said, yeah, it's in my car. So we hopped into his car, which was a black Chevy Caprice, or Impala, I'm sorry, 4-door Impala. And we drove up Highland Ave. He lived on Gibbons Street, right near, 2 blocks away from City Hall. And now it's getting dark. It's around 6 o'clock, 6:15. We took a left on Gibbons Street, which was his street. And as we came down, halfway down the street, it's a one-way, there was his car, parked in front of his house. So I said, oh, shit. I got my phone. I called my sergeant. I actually called 2 sergeants. Had them meet us around the corner. So Brian and I and the 2 sergeants are, we're talking about how we're going to do this operation. It's election night in the city, 6:30 at night. So the city's hopping. People are going to vote at the voting polls. They're going to dinner. They're coming home from dinner, what have you. So there's a lot of foot traffic and a lot of motor vehicle traffic. And so, of course, we're conscious enough to know we don't want innocent people getting shot. This guy's a gun guy. Potentially, who knows? And so the plan was we were going to wait him out. He was going to come out of his house. I'm in a parking lot across the street. Some bushes for cover, and a little opening, a little driveway opening you can fit a car in. So the plan was I'm going to come through the bushes across the street, and when the kid turns his back to go into his car, I'm going to go from behind and hit him, get him to the ground, and cuff him up. Brian is going to come up the one-way street the wrong way in his unmarked car with no headlights, and he's just going to hit his bumper and box him in. My 2 sergeants are going to come up the street and be my backup on foot. And then I had a detective at the top of the street in case Matt put it in reverse and try to leave the other way. He would block his exit point, I should say. So now, we agreed upon this last-minute operation, 6:30 at night. Again, very, very busy. As soon as we said, yeah, let's do this, I remember looking over my shoulder through the bushes, and I saw his porch light come on. He was in the doorway. He was wearing a black, puffy down jacket with a backpack strapped around his shoulder. He was waving to somebody in the house. I couldn't see who it was from my distance, obviously. There was somebody in that house with him. I later learned that it was his mother. So now, I'm walking away from my guys. I grabbed my handheld radio that was in my pocket. I just said, guys, that's our target. Everybody get ready to move in. Those were the last transmissions you heard me say on the radio that night. So now, I make it to the edge of the bushes, and he comes out of his door, his yard, and he's walking really, really fast, faster than I expected. And he made it into his car. Now, I'm going to stop there for a second because I want your audience to know. I know these streets like the back of my hand. It's dark out. The last thing I want is a foot pursuit. Because what I don't know are the backyards. I don't know who's got trampolines, broken fences, kids' toys, dog poop. I mean, cops bust their knees and get hurt really, really bad having foot chases at night, lifted, uneven sidewalks, you name it. You don't know where a sidewalk begins, where it ends, fire hydrants. I mean, there's so many different obstacles. You get hurt really, really easy. So again, I'm trying to avoid a foot pursuit. I want the element of surprise. So like I said, he made it to his car before I can get to him. So as soon as he opened the car door and he shut it, I made a quick beeline, gun in my hand, my badges out, I had a Nike nylon hooded sweatshirt. Mm-hmm. And I made it to the car door. I opened the door. I grabbed him by the neck. I get my gun to his head, and I'm giving him commands. Get out of the effing car. Get out of the effing car right now. You're under arrest. He grabs my wrist, and he's trying to get me off of his throat, and he's looking at me, screaming at the top of his lungs, saying, fucking shoot me, fucking shoot me, fucking shoot me. And at that point, I remember, with the adrenaline, I'm jamming my gun on the side of his head, trying to rip him up, because he lifted his ass off the seat, and he stretched his legs, so it made it really difficult for me to rip him out. And right at that moment, I saw my slide halfway back on my gun. And I looked at it and I said, oh shit. I was thinking to myself, if my gun goes off and this kid's unarmed, I'm the one that's going to jail. I'll lose my job. So I eased up off the gun, still holding onto his neck, and at that moment I heard my sergeant screaming my name. And I looked over the roof of the car to see what he wanted. He was yelling, Mario, Mario, Mario. And I looked up to see what the hell he wanted, and when I looked back down, all I saw was flashes. Boop, 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 boop. 6 rapid shots. And I took the impact of these rounds less than 2 feet away, still with my hand on his neck. And I fell out of the car. I landed on my ass. I remember just looking up and looking at him. My brain was working. I was telling myself, get the fuck up and run. Get cover. Get behind something and shoot him. Get behind, but I couldn't move. I felt paralyzed. I remember everything was echoing. I heard immediate rapid gunfire. Pop, 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 pop. Pop, 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 pop. It was like it wouldn't stop. It was like someone had a machine gun. And it was just firing off rounds. And at some point, as I'm hearing all these echoing shots, I felt someone grab me by the collar of my sweatshirt or my t-shirt and lift me up off the ground. And I looked. It was Brian Higgins, my partner in the ATF. Thank God he had military experience. He did some time overseas. I think it was Afghanistan. So he saw battle. He had the wherewithal to leave his post behind the car. He grabbed me and he was shooting into the car. I remember seeing everything in slow motion. His shell casings were coming out of his gun in slow motion, one by one, and my eyes were following it. And then I felt he dragged me across the street. And he left me like under a parked car. And I was on my side. I'm hyperventilating. My heart was in my throat. And I could feel blood gushing out of me, all up my upper torso. And I was panicked. I was scared shitless, to be honest with you. So I'm on my side, and I can see the kid in the car. He's playing chicken. He's looking over the steering wheel, playing chicken with the cops. My brain said, fucking shoot him. Shoot him. Shoot him. And I tried to lift my arm up. But all I heard was, run. But my arm wasn't moving. And at that point is when I looked at my arm, I had a huge hole in my sweatshirt. I realized that I took a round that went through my forearm, it went through my ulnar nerve, out the back of my elbow. I couldn't pull my trigger finger. I'll tell you, it was probably the hottest moment of my life, because I felt so defeated. I felt helpless. Couldn't help myself. Couldn't help my guys. I remember just looking up at the sky. I just said, I'm not going home. I'm gonna fucking die. I'm not going home today. All the while, I can hear the commotion, yelling and screaming. He's still moving. He's still moving. Pop, pop, pop. I actually heard his mother yelling, "That's my son. You're shooting my son." The cops were telling her to get back in the house and whatnot. Finally, actually, let me stop right there so I don't forget. It's an important part. So during this shootout and this commotion was really, really loud, I remember my mind did something miraculous. For a short period of time, my mind shut off all the noise, and the gunshots and the screaming and yelling. I remember going in a peaceful trance mentally, where I remembered going fishing as a young boy. I remembered my senior prom. I remember playing Revivia on Rush Street, where I grew up in East Somerville, with all my childhood friends. It was almost like I was waiting to go to heaven. I felt a sense of peace for those few seconds. And then suddenly, my mind shifted back to reality, where I could hear the gunshots again, and all the commotion and all the yelling and screaming. And then the gunshots stopped. My guys ran over to me. I was on my back at this point, and they lifted my head up. They said I was ash gray, and my eyes were rolling on the back of my head, but I wouldn't shut the fuck up. I kept yelling at them, "Get me out of here! Throw me in the trunk! Throw me in the back seat! Get me the fuck out of here, because I'm gonna bleed out. I've lost a lot of blood, because I felt the blood oozing out of my stomach and out of my chest." And at that point is when Joe McCain, who was my sergeant, he was right in my face. I hate coffee. I don't drink coffee. And all I could smell was a stinky coffee breath. And I remember grabbing him by the shirt, and I pulled him close to my face, and I said, "Joe, don't let me fucking die. Don't let me die. I got to get home to my boy. My son Drew was only 3 at the time. I said, don't let me die. I got to get home to my son. Don't let me die. And he said, brother, stay with us. Keep breathing, keep talking. He told me afterwards that when he laid me down, he walked away and cried like a baby because he figured those were the last words he was ever going to hear out of my mouth. It was the way I looked. He actually sat down, put his gun by his feet. So one of the senior officers who had showed up told him, get your shit together, Joe. Neighbors coming up with their phones and they're recording people. Let's go. The cavalry's coming. So here's a grown man, 30-year veteran, who pretty much fell apart at that scene. But, had no fault of his own. He just saw he was about to see his friend die, take his last breath. So he thought. So now, the paramedics finally came. They put me on the gurney, on the stretcher, and they were rushing me to the back of the ambulance. And I remember this distinctly. My deputy chief, Paul Upton, had arrived on scene at that time. And as they whisked me by them, I heard him ask one of the paramedics, how does he look? And I heard the paramedic say, I don't think he's going to make the trip. Imagine hearing that, Dean. Pretty much, he's a fucking dead man. I heard that. I heard them say, I don't think he's going to make the trip. And I'll tell you, that fired me up like you wouldn't believe. In my mind, I had so much strength and anger, I could have lifted that bar off of that stretcher. That's how pissed off I was. Now I'm in the back of the ambulance, and I'm yelling at the paramedic who was treating me. Do your fucking job, and I'm going to do mine. You keep me alive, and I'm going to fight to stay alive. I got to get home to my son. My son's 3, and he needs his father. And I got to be there for him. And he said, oh, you have 2 boys? And I said, what are you, a jerk? I just fucking told you I had 1. I didn't know then that he was checking my mental status. I thought I was being a punk. So they eventually got me to the hospital, to Mass General. I remember getting there, it was chaos. It was chaotic. Everybody was scrambling, screaming, yelling, running around. They brought me into the trauma bay. And initially, everybody was around me, cutting off my clothes, putting on gadgets, whatever the hell they were doing to me to save me. And then a few short seconds went by, and there was nobody tending to me. I'm shivering. I'm naked. They got the friggin' AC on in November. They get whatever. It's cold in there. And I remember just looking up at the ceiling, staring at these lights. But I felt a presence over to my left. Someone was just standing there, watching me. They were in a white, the nurse's outfits. What do you call those things?
The nurse's station?
No, the nurse's clothes.
Oh, the scrubs.
Scrubs, yeah. They were in white scrubs. And I was afraid to look initially, and then I just ducked my head and looked. And I saw who I described was an older woman, like 65-ish years old. She was kind of stocky and chunky, short. She had big circular round glasses. And her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. And this nurse walked over to me. And with one hand, she lifted the back of my head up. The other hand, she was massaging my forehead. She kept saying to me, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And I looked at her and I said, please put a blanket on me. I'm very cold. I think she did because I felt warm. I didn't see a blanket, but I felt warmer than I was just seconds before. And then without any type of notice whatsoever, they rushed me out of that emergency room. They were running down the hall at full speed. My doctor was at the front of the bed, pulling it. They took a corner to go to the right, to the elevator, and I heard my doctor screaming, hold the elevator, we're going to floor 2. They took a right. I almost toppled over, but they caught me, put me upright, and I'm thinking, these people are going to kill me before I even make it to the operating room. What the hell? So now I'm in the elevator, and I heard them talking in there about my surgeon barking orders to the nurses. Fire up the x-ray machine, do this, do that. And then within seconds, I was in the operating room. I knew I was there because it was much quieter. The atmosphere was much calmer. The lights were much brighter. And again, I'm lying there just staring at the ceiling, and I'm thinking, I can't freaking believe I'm alive still to watch all this. And at that point, again, I felt a presence to my left side, just someone standing there watching me. And I dipped my head again and I looked. It was that same older nurse from downstairs, short, stocky, with the round glasses, and hair pulled back in a tight bun. She came over to me again, lifted the back of my head, was massaging my forehead with the other hand. She kept saying to me, "You're gonna be okay, you're gonna be okay." I remember looking in her eyes and I said, "Just let me die. I'm tired of fighting. I can't fight any longer. I'm tired." At that point, I was so tired of just, the adrenaline, whatever you want to call it. I just needed to stay alive for my family. And I ran out of gas. And then she was looking in my eyes and she said, "Oh, no, you're not going to die tonight. You're not going to die. You're going to be okay." And that's all I heard, or all I remember, I should say. She laid my head down, and I don't remember anything else. So I woke up a day and a half later in the ICU. I remember after the anesthesia wore off, I woke up and I was looking around. I was a little confused. I didn't know where I was. I thought I was going to wake up in heaven or wherever you go. And I saw my wife and my parents. Of course, they're crying. I had a feeding tube up my nose and down my stomach. My arm was up on the slings. I took around right here. And I said, "I'm alive." I said, "Yes, you are." And I'm like, "Oh," I started to cry. One of the nurses heard me speak. She went to go get my doctor, Dr. King. And that's the first time I formally met him. He came through the curtains. And I remember he was at the foot of my bed. He reached my foot and he squeezed it and he said, "Hey, champ, you feel that?" I said, "Yeah, I'm not paralyzed." He said, "No, you're not. You, my friend, are the luckiest SOB I've ever met in my life." He said, "I'm a colonel in the Army. I've done 14 tours to Iraq and Afghanistan. I've never seen anybody survive what you survived." And he told me where I got shot. He said, "You took 2 rounds to the chest, 3 rounds to the stomach, and 1 to your arm, all at point-blank range. And he died on me twice." He told me that on.
Did you say you died? Did you say you died twice?
Yes, I died twice in the hospital. Yes, the first time for 3.5 minutes, he said, and the second time for almost 4 minutes, gone. And he said on the second episode where I arrested completely, rather than cutting my breastbone, he cut a hole in my diaphragm and he reached in and he massaged my heart back to life. If we had the wherewithal today, I would show you the videos of his testimony, how he did this. So he actually cut my diaphragm, reached in, massaged my heart back to life. And, he said that's all it took. A few pumps and I came back and they got me stable. So as he's telling me this at my bedside in the ICU, I'm crying and I'm thanking him for saving me. And I told him, I said, "Doc, there was a nurse here that night that helped me. I want you to get her for me so I can thank her. I want to meet her. I want to meet this woman. And she put me at ease and she really, really calmed me down." And he looked at me and my parents and he said, "What nurse are you talking about?" I said, "Well, I saw her in the emergency room when you guys first brought me in. I was in the trauma bay and I described her to him and what she did and what she said. And I said, and then you guys ran me out of that room, the emergency room. You were flying down the hall. You were dragging the bed. You took a right to go to the elevator. You were screaming and yelling to hold the elevator. We're going to floor 2. And he looked at my parents and my wife and he did that. Time out. He goes, "How do you know this?" And I said, "Because I was on the bed." He said, "No, my friend, you were dead. You had no pulse. You weren't breathing. You were dead. You were clinically dead. Dead man can't form memories. I don't know how you know this. But you're 100% right in what happened to you." Then he said, "Tell me more about this nurse. When did you see her again?" I said, "She was with me in the operating room as well." And, I told him what she said, what she did, and what they were doing to me to prep me for the operation. And he looked at my parents again and he said, "Listen, again, I don't know how you have all these accurate memories, but you shouldn't have any memories. Dead men can't form memories." And he said, and as far as the nurse is concerned, there was nobody on my trauma team that looked like that. And 2 seconds before that, when I described the nurse again, my mom had collapsed in the room. And my dad picked her up and put her in the chair and told her to shut up. We're Portuguese, that's the old-fashioned Portuguese deal, So he put her on the chair, told her to be quiet. She's bawling her eyes out. And so the doctor told me, he assured me that there was no nurse on his trauma team that looked like that. That would have been allowed to touch me, let alone be near me. But I begged him to go and do a more thorough check or research about who this nurse may have been. He said he would. A week later, he came in, or not even a couple of days later, he came back to see me, and he said, "Buddy, I can assure you with utter certainty that there was no nurse on my trauma team that looked like that." I said, "All right, this is a mystery. I don't know." So, of course, life goes on, and I did my time in the hospital. And the day that I was going to go home, I remember the nurses came up, and I had staples going down the middle of my chest down towards my groin area, past my belly button. And the nurses said, "Oh, you're going home today. We're going to remove these staples." And I said, "No, don't. I don't think I'm healed yet." They said, "No, you'll be fine. You'll be fine." So they removed my staples. They got me dressed, and they put me in a wheelchair and brought me downstairs where the mayor was there from my city, the chief of police, a bunch of other dignitaries, and other politicians that were there. The head of the ATF in Boston was there, and they all did their little speeches and what they normally do at these political events. And I just sat in a wheelchair quiet. I just wanted to go home and see my boy. And they got me in a cruiser. We had a nice, beautiful motorcade of police cars and motorcycles that escorted me home. And I'll tell you, Dean, it's probably one of the most proudest moments of my life. 8 o'clock. I saw police officers from all over the place, stopping traffic at intersections, saluting me as the motorcade drove by. I was never more proud to be a cop on that day. And to me, that showed me that the thin blue line exists. It was alive. It was alive. I'll never forget it. And I made it home. I lived in Billerica at the time. And my mom was at home cooking for an army of officers who were going to be bringing me home. And we pulled up in front of my house. My boy's at the door, screaming and yelling of joy, jumping up and down again. He's only 3.5. "Daddy's home, Daddy's home, Daddy's home." I walked up my walkway very gingerly with a cane, excited to hug him for the first time in almost a month. And when I opened the door, I leaned over to hug him, gave him such a squeeze and a kiss. When I stood up and I walked into the foyer of my house, I felt wet in my stomach. So I reached in under my sweatshirt and pulled out my hand. It was full of blood. So when the officers that were there lifted my sweatshirt up and my shirt, my stomach had come undone and my guts were hanging out. So they had to lay me down in the foyer of my house, pack me with towels, and rush me back to the hospital.
So they came through the skin and your intestines were exposed.
Well, yeah, the skin popped open. I wasn't healed. Those dummies didn't listen to me. And I told them not to take the staples out. I knew I wasn't healed. But because of the movement, and I don't know what happened, what triggered it, but the seam that they sewed me up came undone. My insides were showing. And so they had to rush me back to the hospital, where I stayed for a few hours, where they ran some more tests, cleaned out the wounds, and they stitched me up this time. And they sent me home with 2 gaping open wounds, one right in the center of my chest and one right next to my navel. And they were very, very deep. The doctor told me that they were going to send a nurse to my house who was going to pack the wounds with something that would make the flesh come together. Otherwise, he said, the skin would heal, but people would be able to poke their fingers inside my body. And I told him, okay, that's fine. So the next day, I went home that night, slept on the couch. That's where I stayed for weeks, months actually. I couldn't walk. The nurse came over, and she tended to my open wounds, cleaned them out, and then she looked at her medical bag and noticed that she was out of gauze, the right size gauze to cover these wounds. So she asked my wife if there was a CVS nearby. My wife said, yeah, I have to go to CVS anyway. Tell me what you need, I'll go buy it. So my wife leaves to CVS, comes back, gives her the gauze. The nurse covers my wounds, and she leaves. A few minutes later, I'm watching Oprah or whatever the hell was on TV, and I could hear my wife in the kitchen sniffling. I thought she was crying. So I lower the volume, and I'm listening intently, and I can hear her sniffling. So I called her in the room, and I asked her to come in, and I asked her what was going on. And she looked like she had been crying. and she sat next to me, and she put one of those pregnancy things in front of me, and I'm looking at it, squinting at it, and it said pregnant. I said, "You fucking bitch, you cheated on me while I was in the hospital?" So we found out my wife was pregnant the day I got home from the hospital. 9 months later, I had another baby boy born on my birthday. The paramedic was right. I had 2 boys. I just didn't know it.
That's incredible.
Instead of God taking my life, He gave me a life. He gave me a life. The next day, my mom and dad came over. I mentioned earlier, I'm Portuguese, 100% Portuguese. And for the Portuguese people, kale soup is like Windex is for the Greeks. It cures cancer. So my mom and dad brought some kale soup over because I was on a liquid diet. I couldn't eat anything solid per doctor's orders. And my mom came over. My dad went in the kitchen. My mom had a picture frame like this, clutched to her chest. And she was crying. She came over and sat next to me. And I asked her what she had with her. And she said, "I brought something for you. So I want you to keep this on your wall at home. Promise me you'll keep it on your wall." I said, "Absolutely, Mom. What is it?" When she handed me the picture frame, I looked at it, and I just started to cry. I just started to bawl my eyes up. The woman in the picture was my nurse. It was my nurse. It was my grandmother. My grandmother who died 30 years ago. That's why no one knew her. And when I found out later through my brother, who's also a police officer and still is, he is the one that called my mother to let her know that I had been shot. He had heard through the grapevine that I died and moved to the hospital. It was that bad. So he called my mom up to tell her that I had been shot and it didn't look good. My mom, upon hearing this news, fell to her knees, hit the ground, dropped the phone, the cordless phone. She started praying to her mother, "Mom, please save my son. Save my son. Don't let him die." And wouldn't you believe? That's who came to my side that night. That's who I saw. Who would talk to me.
Speechless. Mario, this is incredible. Again, folks, for those of you that are, well, Mario, we'll give him a minute here. For those of you that are just tuning in, this is Difficult Conversations by Supply the Y. We're here with Mario Oliveira, retired detective, Somerville PD, and he's sharing the kind of story that everybody needs to hear. That I don't care if you're white, black, if you're religious, not religious, if you're a police officer, if you're not, this is a human story. And if you can't feel something when you hear a story like this, I don't know, there's something wrong with you, because this is as real as it gets. So go ahead, Mario.
So I did 5 months recovery at my house. I pushed myself really, really hard. I went back to work in 5 months. On March 4th, I went back to Somerville PD, full duty, not a desk job. I ended up going back to the ATF, kicking down doors, getting guns off the street, only to suffer a major heart attack 8 months later. I woke up in the ICU with a balloon pump in my heart, and my surgeon said, "No more for you, buddy. You have to call it quits." And I retired at that point. I put in my paperwork. Then in 2015, on June 30th, I suffered a major stroke that left me paralyzed in my whole left side for the whole summer of 2015. I spent the whole summer installed in rehab, learning how to walk, talk, feed myself, yada yada. And by the grace of God, I got everything back, and I have some minor issues on my left side, but all in all, I can function pretty well. And I don't know when do you want me to go into with my retirement process?
I'm sorry, say again, Mario.
So when I try to retire, I want the audience to know this. Let me go into, so for the purposes of educating your audience, those that are officers and non-officers. When you die in the line of duty, there are benefits that are afforded to your loved ones, to your beneficiaries. So if you die in the line of duty, the federal government would pay your beneficiary, usually your spouse, $365,670. That's what the pay is right now. It changes every couple of years. So as of right now, it's $365,670, tax-free, and the money comes from the Department of Justice through the PSOB, Public Safety Officers Benefits Program. In addition to that, the state of Mass would give your spouse a $300,000 tax-free payment. So right off the cuff, you're getting over $600,000. Your family is. Whatever rank you held at the time of your death, your spouse would get your base salary for life. For life. So if you were a sergeant and you died in line of duty, your wife would get your sergeant's pay for life. Every raise the department gets, negotiates through contract negotiations, your spouse gets those raises as well. Any stipends that your union gets, your officers, she gets them as well. They have to pay her as if you're still there. If you own a home in Massachusetts, you have real estate tax exemption. Your wife would be exempt from paying property taxes on your home. If you have children and they want to go to school, you have in-state college tuition paid for. Any state school, free ride. If your children want to be cops or firemen and have a civil service job, they go right to the top of the list under a wounded veteran. It's called the 402A status. And then lastly, if you're a member of the NRA, they also have a $35,000 line of duty that pay out, tax-free. So those are all the benefits that you get when you die. Now, if you survive like me, the law states you get 72% of your pay, which is a little bit more than half. And then, to add insult to injury, you can't earn more than $15,000 a year, or work more than $960. And recently, they just passed a new law last week, raise it up to $1,200 if you do die. So essentially, we're worth more dead than we are alive. Really, that's the truth. You're worth more, financially speaking. You're worth more dead to your family than you are alive.
It's infuriating.
I find that deeply offensive. It's appalling. So what did I do? I did a lot of research. Being a detective, my job is to find the truth, right? Dig, and find the truth. So I learned back in that point in 2010, that in 2010 there had been 49 officers who had retired with 100% of their pay, life, through their city or town. And basically, the mayor or the town manager of their municipality, they write up special legislation that supersedes the law of 72%, and that officer would get 100%. 100% of their pay, tax-free, with all the raises. And so, knowing this, I went to my chief. At the time, it was a new chief, Tom Pasquarello, a good guy. And I said, Chief, this exists. He knew about it. I said, would you see the mayor and ask him if he would support me for this? I really would like to get it. I have a 3.5-year-old little boy and a brand new baby. And, my career is gone. In the blink of an eye. The rug got pulled out from underneath me. I had no fault of my own. I can't live on just a little over half of my pay. I have a mortgage, a car payment, bills like everybody else, And for a year and a half, I waited at home for a phone call from the mayor and never got one.
He didn't call to check on you in a year and a half.
No.
Not so much as a, hey, how you doing?
Never called. And I'll tell you guys right now, that year and a half hurt me more than getting shot. I sat at home, worried, wondering, not knowing how I was going to take care of my family. And I felt like I became a burden, my own family. So here's my wife working extra hours at the law firm. She was cleaning up, mowing the lawn, and I couldn't, I felt like a bag of shit. I couldn't do much. Now I've been shot, now I've had a heart attack, and now a stroke. And I was just like, how do I move on from this? And it did a number on me. I dropped down to about 130 pounds. soaking wet. I wouldn't go to any family functions. I never left my room. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to see anybody. I hated everybody. I felt betrayed, administrative betrayal. I felt like I was harmed. The city didn't give a shit about me. Now, I'll have you know, your audience saw the clip. From this day, till this day, I'm one of the highest decorated cops in the history of my department. I have never been reprimanded, suspended, never, my whole career. Just nothing but commendations and accolades and everything else. And this is how they treat you. I wasn't a problem child. I was never up in the chief's office or the mayor's office for any wrongdoing. I wasn't accused of anything bad, violating policy, never. Mayor came close a couple of times, to be honest with you, but I never did anything bad, you know? I was a good cop. I was a cop's cop who just loved my job. I just loved my job. And to be treated like that afterwards, like I was a broken toy in the land of misfit toys. That's how I felt.
Because Mario, one of the things I was going to ask you, but you went right into it, was I was going to ask you what kind of follow-up and what kind of support you received from your administration and your local politicians, but it sounds to me like you just kind of put it out there.
Yeah, as far as my department, they were awesome. My chief, my deputy chiefs, the rank and file, sergeants, lieutenants, they would come up to my house. They were bringing stuffed animals for my boys. They were bringing us food. The folks at the ATF were phenomenal. I mean, the police families, as far as our departments, the agencies, they were the best. The one that really got me good was the community of Somerville. People of Somerville, the little kids who would mail me cards, well wishes. They were sending me edible arrangements every day. I felt I could have started my own warehouse of edible arrangements. That's how much I got. 3 times a day, people were delivering edible arrangements and food to my house. So the community, the outpouring support of the community was phenomenal. I only wish it was like that now. Oh, it's travesty what's going on. And that's for later on, but
we'll have you back to talk about that another time.
Yeah, the community was phenomenal. I can't thank them enough. The school children, the teachers, the residents of Somerville, they were phenomenal. I will never, ever forget their graciousness and their support.
So, Mario, we're down, believe it or not, we got about 7.5 minutes left. So why don't we move into something that's super positive, because you're doing some great stuff. Tell us about VIPO and New England Cops, if you can sum that up in about 5 minutes or so.
Sure. So after waiting a year and a half, I had the late Senator Ken Donnelly, God rest his soul. He came to my house and he helped me and went to go see the mayor and finally got my retirement pushed through, the special legislation. So I did some thinking and I said, you know what? God gave me a second chance here on earth. I'm going to do something good with my life. And I started an organization, a nonprofit, called VIPO, Violently Injured Police Officers, along with my partner from Woburn, Bob DiNapoli, who was also shot and went through a very similar ordeal with his mayor. And Bob and I have legislation pending up at the State House that, if passed, it's going to provide benefits to those that are permanently and violently injured. Small and very narrow window. It's not for the guy or gal that busted their knee. They have to be shot, stabbed, run over by a car or a truck, explosive device, hit with a blunt object. If that's passed, it's going to be 100% of your pay, tax-free, up until you reach the age of 65. Your medical bills are going to be covered by the town or the city. No income restrictions on your earnings, so you can actually earn and provide for your family once again. Okay? That's huge. So those are the benefits that you get if this is passed, if you're permanently and you can't come back to the job. It'd be a violent act.
How can people support you? How can people bring more awareness to that cause?
They can reach out to the state senator or state representative and let them know. Senate Bill 1644 is up there. Senator Bruce Tarr is the lead sponsor, and the other sponsor is Senator Cindy Friedman. So those two senators, one's a Democrat, one's a Republican. We have bipartisan support, but we need more support. Last year we came really close, but then COVID hit us and they shut everything down. we had a really good chance of passing this thing last year. And I'll tell you right now, law enforcement needs a win. We need a win for the good guys. We're getting killed every day out there. And I mean that. We are getting lambasted by the media and some politicians, and we're like the bastard children right now, and that's not true. It's just not fair. We need a win. We need some protections. Because we're the people that stand between evil and good. No one else has the guts to do it. We're the special ones, chosen by God to stand on that front line and battle these devious people.
100%. It's so what we're going to do, Mario, why don't we do this? Why don't we make an agreement that you and I will link up at some point after the show, and let's get some links that we're going to blast out through all the Supply the Why platforms. Folks, if you're out there, if you've liked and you're following the Supply the Why pages, we need your help. We need you to also share and support this. And don't just share the link. We need you to put a little something with it. Provide some context as to why it's important to you and why you think your community needs that. And I need you to share that as well. Mario needs you to share that. Bob DiNapoli needs you to share that. And so many other, and the thousands of other police officers across the Commonwealth and across the country. We need you to share that. And we need you to support that, because the several levels of indignity that Mario had to endure, it didn't need to happen like that. At the very least, when you have people that are going out there and being willing to put themselves in harm's way for all of you, I think the least you can do is just make sure that if something like the nightmare that Mario lives through happens, that there is some protection in place, not just for Mario, but for families as well.
Absolutely. And I passed my legislation, oddly enough. We started here in Massachusetts, and in the last 3 years, I've passed it in Kentucky and Oklahoma. So I've passed my legislation in 2 other states. And my vision, my goal, my dream is to have it flush the whole United States, and every state to adopt this, to give protections to all our officers across the country.
That's a dream, and I got to be honest, after tonight, I have to imagine that you've converted a lot of people, and that's now going to become other people's dream. It is now one of my dreams, and I am going to do what I can to use my small platform here to help blast that out there and make people aware of that. So, like I said, we're gonna stay in touch like we have. We're going to collaborate, and we're going to see what we can do about making some noise on this bill. And hopefully a lot of people in the audience are with me, and people that are catching the replay of this on the podcast and in the web form will also jump on board. Mario, I can't thank you enough for taking the time out to share this with us. I can't imagine what it must be like to have to retell this story and constantly rip the Band-Aid off every time you speak, and every time somebody like me comes along and says, hey, you got a great story. I think that you are a difference maker, and I want you to tell your story. So I apologize if I'm re-victimizing you, but I also want to thank you on behalf of everybody in the Commonwealth and beyond for making us better people by sharing your story with us.
Thank you very much.
So, folks, that's going to do it for us tonight. Again, big thanks to Mario. Big thanks to everybody that's taken the time out to watch these shows. This is just the beginning of what's going to be an unbelievable season 5 of Difficult Conversations. Again, if you haven't already, subscribe, follow, like Supply the Why. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. We have the podcast versions for if you're working out or if you're on the job and you can't watch the webcast, don't worry, we got you covered. Check out our podcast. We're on all the major podcast platforms, and this will be available in a couple days. So, folks, again, I just want to thank everybody for coming out and spread the word about what we're trying to do here. So on behalf of Mario, I want to wish everybody a good night. And as always, #Supply the Why. Good night.
God bless.